All right, let's just dive right into this explainer, because today we are completely dismantling a massive myth. We've all been sold this lie that some people are just naturally disciplined, while the rest of us are somehow doomed to procrastinate forever. Well, today we're replacing that myth with a hardcore neurobiology-based system used by top Eastern students to engineer absolute, bulletproof focus. We've got a ton of ground to cover. Here is our roadmap. We'll start by decoding the willpower myth, then build your environment architecture, hack your activation energy, master the deep focus block, implement active retention, and finally, lock it all in with the identity shift. Let's get to it. So why do you feel completely paralyzed at 2 a.m. with a textbook wide open? Look, it is absolutely crucial you understand this right off the bat. You aren't lazy. When you're sitting there staring at a page, unable to read a single word, and just feeling universally terrible about yourself, your brain is literally treating your upcoming high-stakes exam like a saber-toothed tiger. I'm serious. Your amygdala perceives the assignment as a massive threat of social failure, and it locks you into a biological freeze response. You're not broken, guys. Your biology is just trying to protect you. Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast between two entirely different approaches. On one hand, you've got the busy student relying on sheer agonizing willpower, toggling between notes and group chats, passively highlighting for 8 hours, and honestly, learning almost nothing. But then look at the productive student. This elite student relies on a totally friction-free system. They lock in for a fraction of the time, just 90 minutes, and actually master the material. It is literally night and day. Okay, moving straight into section 1, the willpower lie and decoding the freeze loop. So what actually is this freeze loop? Well, when you tell yourself, I'll just start in 5 minutes, and you open up your phone instead, your amygdala actually gets a hit of dopamine just for avoiding the perceived threat of that assignment. And this is wild. It completely powers down your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, rational part of your brain. You are literally training your brain to get better at procrastinating, which just feeds this totally toxic cycle of guilt and avoidance. This brings us to a quote that really hits the nail on the head. Motivation is an emotion. Building your future on motivation is like building a house on the ocean. Waiting to feel like it is just a terrible strategy. Motivation is honestly kind of a scam designed to make you wait for a temporary vibe. Emotions fluctuate like crazy. Elite students, they do not rely on motivation. They rely entirely on non-negotiable systems that work even on the days they absolutely load the material. Right, on to section 2, architecting the environment, and the famous Hagwon rule. Think of willpower as a battery that's just constantly draining. To stop that, we need to completely eliminate cognitive leaks by engineering our physical space. Think about the intense Hagwon cram schools over in South Korea. They have walls on both sides of the desk, no phones anywhere, and just a single light overhead. By intentionally putting huge physical distance between yourself and your distractions, you ensure you don't waste a single ounce of precious mental energy deciding whether to check your notifications. Seriously, if your phone is on your desk, even face down, a part of your brain is obsessing over it. Banish it to another room. And just to put the cost of a distraction into perspective, look at this number, 23. It takes your brain up to 23 minutes to regain deep focus after just briefly glancing at a phone notification. 23 minutes. That completely wrecks your attention architecture. If you check your phone 3 times in an hour, neurologically speaking, your study session literally never even started. Which brings us to section 3, hacking activation energy, using what we call the Lotus method. Look, the absolute hardest part of studying isn't the studying itself, right? It's the activation energy, just getting started. First, you call out the fear. Then you slowly lower your cortisol with 90 seconds of specific stillness breathing to calm the vagus nerve. Next, do a 2-minute brain dump of all those intrusive anxieties right onto a blank page. And finally, commit to just 10 minutes of a ridiculously simple mechanical task, like literally just copying a title. By doing this sequence, you completely bypass your brain's threat threshold. And here is where it gets like magic. Enter the Zeigarnik effect. Once those initial 10 minutes of mechanical work are up, physics and neurology just take over. Your brain has this absolute innate hatred of unfinished tasks. It creates a cognitive itch that practically forces you to keep the momentum going. You don't need the discipline to study for 2 whole hours. You literally only need the discipline to trick your brain into starting those first 10 minutes. Okay, let's roll into section 4, the deep focus block, and the 90-20 rule. Now, rather than fighting your biology with crazy caffeine jitters, you can actually stack these specific neurochemicals just by executing your activation ritual perfectly and stepping into your dialed-in environment. It's like a chemical cocktail for success. You've got dopamine driving your desire. Norepinephrine acts like a sniper to completely kill outside noise. Acetylcholine works like a scalpel to physically wire those new neural connections. And serotonin is there as your buffer, keeping you calm when you hit a frustrating problem. But you absolutely have to respect your biology here. Your brain operates on strict ultradian rhythms. Trying to study for 6 consecutive hours? That is actually academic suicide because your neural glucose completely tanks after about 90 minutes of single-task focus. You must rest completely screen-free for 20 minutes to consolidate what you just learned. Honestly, looking at TikTok during this break is like dumping a giant bucket of water on a campfire you just spent an hour painstakingly building. All right, moving to section 5, active retention. We're talking blank pages and the traffic light system. So reading and highlighting, those are passive lies that just trick you into feeling productive. Real memory is built in that highly uncomfortable moment when you forced your brain to retrieve information from a totally blank page, which is known in Korea as the Bakje method. After you try a blank page recall, grade yourself using this exact traffic light matrix. Green means confident recall, skip the review entirely. Yellow means minor gaps, review it actively. Red means you cannot reconstruct it at all. Prioritize that urgently. You've got to stop wasting hours reviewing the green stuff you already know and surgically target your red weaknesses. And when they do hit those red weaknesses, elite students treat their failures purely as data. They collect their losses in a dedicated mistake notebook, often called a quotidian. And they don't just passively read the correct answer. No way. They ask, what exactly did I mess up? Why did I mess it up? What am I going to do differently? They ruthlessly dissect it so they never ever repeat that same error under the pressure of a high-stakes exam. Now, pay close attention to this metric, 0.8. This is the Sunung coefficient. It is the ratio of your actual deep focus minutes divided by the total minutes you spent sitting at your desk. If you sit there for 4 hours but only really focus for 1, your coefficient is a terrible 0.25. Hitting a 0.8 means you are studying with surgical, game-changing precision. If you track this honestly, you'll quickly realize you don't need to study longer, you just need to study for real. Finally, let's bring it all together in Section 6, Building an Elite Identity, also known as the shift. Making this whole system work requires a profound identity shift. You see, an average student wakes up and says, "Ugh, I have to study today," and then completely burns out their mental battery just debating with themselves about whether they feel like doing it. But an elite student, they don't debate. Saying I am an elite student means it is simply who they are and what they do. Every tiny choice you make is just a vote for the person you are becoming. To build that identity, we can look to these 4 ancient Japanese principles. They teach us that true learning is not about speed reading for aesthetic clout. First, Rakai tells us to slow down and truly master a concept. Next, Ichigo Niku pushes us to obsess deeply over a single domain. Then, the thinking document forces us to write to actually discover our thoughts, not just record them. And finally, Jen demands that we apply this knowledge to the real world. Doing this makes you dangerously self-educated and, honestly, practically unstoppable. And this perfectly tees up our major takeaway here. Discipline isn't something you feel, it's something you design. You don't have to change your entire personality overnight. You just have to set up your environment, protect your time blocks, and embrace the friction of learning. Architecting your environment really is the only reliable way to hack your way out of burnout. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. What kind of mind do you actually want to live inside of for the rest of your life? Because at the end of the day, your mind is the only thing you truly own. You aren't just what you know. You are exactly what you had the guts to learn deeply, deliberately, and systematically. You got the tools, you understand the neurochemistry, and you have the exact system. What you do with it starting today, well, that's entirely up to you.